We're going to move down to item 18. We're running behind. It's obviously everybody can understand, but we wanted to give folks their say. So we're going to keep our presentations shorter. I'm going to have stopwatch going. When I put up this hand, you got 1 minute. When I put up this, I'm going to hit you with it.
How much total time do I have?
Everybody understand? You have about 3.5 minutes.
Okay, I can do that.
All right, let's move. Item 18.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Stephen Keck with Caltrans. This is my regular monthly budget and allocation capacity update. Through March, which is 3/4 through the fiscal year, we have allocated about half of the allocation capacity made available this year. That's going to change pretty significantly today. I think you'll be talking about allocating some of the STIP money today, a large portion of which has been on hold for some time. And I know in the next meeting at least, we're going to have some very significant allocations that will move this very significantly towards completion. And of course, any capacity that's not used in this year will roll over to next year for use on projects that are ready. We talked briefly about the May revise from the governor. This particular slide is to emphasize that the governor continues to hold a very fiscally responsible position and warn of impending downturn in the economy. Generally speaking, a recession is followed by recovery, and we are right now 2 years past the average recovery length. So the governor continues to preach fiscal constraint and reminds everyone that we are already overdue for the next downturn in the economy. We had a few May revision proposals directly related to transportation. All of these have been acted on by the legislature already, or the subcommittees of the legislature. The first is a decrease in the capital outlay support program that is commensurate with the ending of Prop 1B as it slowly fades away, and of course with the very significant cut to the STIP. We had a BCP that creates a permanent ongoing load rating program within the department to load rate bridges to maintain federal compliance. And of course we have a BCP that allows us to collect reimbursement for some toll roads in District 7 for the work we do on those. That was pretty much a slam dunk. All of these have been approved by the legislature as of this morning. Both houses have acted on this. Undersecretary Annis actually covered on almost the exact detail this page, which talks about the administration's proposal for the freight money. And as he mentioned, the language that we put forth to allow the commission to allocate a match if we are successful in receiving a fast lane grant from the feds was approved this morning, and the greater policy discussion was pushed off to the policy committee. At the last meeting, I was not asked this question, but somebody was asked how Caltrans recovers damages to our infrastructure from folks that run into our stuff, whether this is a center divide, a sign post, even cones or traffic dividers. And so what I brought forward today was some numbers that show what the damage annually is. You can see this is the last 3 years. We've ranged from $36 to $43 million in damage to our equipment every year. In many cases, we don't know who caused the damage. They may hit a center divider and drive off. They often run over cones and drive off, and signs and such. In those cases where we do know who caused the damage, we bill them. And we collect on average about $11 million a year in damages from those folks. Represents about 2/3 of what we bill them for. So actually not a bad number at all, given that we don't know who caused most of the damage, but those that we do know, we collect a very significant percentage.
Even why don't we collect all of it? If we build them for 100%, why are we getting 100%?
Well, some people don't want to pay us. And some people don't pay us, and they refuse, or they don't have the funding.
I use that on my taxes.
Yeah. You can try, yeah. So, yeah, there are collection methods that we use. And, we may have billed somebody in 2013 and not collected yet, so there may still be some collections outstanding. In other cases, they're indigent. Sometimes they're incarcerated. sometimes they're incarcerated because of why they hit our equipment, and are unable to pay. So, 2/3 may not seem like it's enough, but it certainly is a consistent number over time. So I think, certainly we're getting what we can out of the folks that it's
It's a consistently poor number over time. I'm appalled we're not going after, if we build them that much, if they've got insurance, why we're not getting 100%. Making notes?
I can make notes to find out more reasons why we can't collect, but I can't give you a different number.
Well, who handles it?
Hey, we got to move this along now, so,
Can I just ask who handles it really fast? Who handles the collection? Is there a collection agency, or is it Attorney General's office? Who handles it?
So we handle the collection. We bill usually insurance companies for the damage. I don't believe the state is allowed to use a collection agency to collect on debts. That may not be the case, but this is not my area of expertise.
We work it up to a point, and we will turn it over to a collection agency.
Okay. So ignore what I just said.
Okay.
Well, what happens when we lose a whole bridge or something? These total damage numbers look a little low to me if we're looking at our whole systems here.
The major impacts that you have heard about in the past, like the one CTC meeting in Paramount Boulevard, we got reimbursed for a significant portion of that. That would probably not be in this. Those numbers might have been 11, 12, but that would not be captured in here. That was the replacement of that bridge was, the size of any of those numbers.
continue, please.
Coming up at the next CTC meeting, we'll be discussing allocation capacity for the following fiscal year. And of course, we expect the budget to be passed on time. Remind everyone that in July, the price-based excise tax decreases down to 9.8 cents per gallon, and diesel excise tax will increase to 16 cents per gallon. And in July, we begin the road charge pilot program, which I think you'll hear more about tomorrow. And then in August, we will bring forward the final allocation capacity for the fiscal year based on the actual enacted budget. And I'll be happy to take questions on that item.
I have one question. Could you go back to the one on the first slides, the capital outlay support? Right there.
Yep.
So that little bullet that says contingent upon adoption of the governor's transportation funding plan, an increase of 877 FTEs. FTEs is?
An FTE is a full-time equivalent, and that is either a state staff person or a contracted person.
So assuming that the governor's transportation funding plan was passed, which we have no evidence of at the current time, but if it was, you're saying that the legislature has approved an addition, almost an additional 1,000.
I may have intimated that by trying to rush through this, but what the action was taken was to approve the baseline decrease and to reject the increase of 877 because there has been no action on a new funding plan.
But if it did pass, you're saying that Caltrans would need an additional 877?
That's correct, just for
positions.
next year, yes.
So I don't want to get in a big discussion about that, but I want to find out more about how you come to those figures, because it just seems to me that with the decline in funding and the decline in actual projects, I'm wondering why we would need to ramp up 1,000 extra people. There must be people that could be put to work with.
FTEs would be a mix of consultants and in-house staff. It would be a mix.
Sure, but the short answer is also that we have reduced 3,600 positions since Proposition 1B was passed. So we've been reducing every single year for 9 years and have reduced the cap outlay support program by 27% in the last 9 years.
This upcoming year's request into the budget for staffing, and actually that decrease of 94 is down from the January proposal, which had a decrease of 97. So compared to this current year, next year's request is 191 FTEs lower. That's the lowest staffing level in our capital program since 1997, 1998, 19 years.
Okay. If you have some kind of I don't want to create a project for somebody, but I'm sure you have some kind of spreadsheet or something that gets you to these numbers. I would just like to see how how that works out.
Right, we can absolutely provide that information.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair. Stephen, could you explain to me what Plan B is if the governor's funding plan for transportation is not adopted? What the amount of reductions will take place?
So that is actually the reduction that we have already requested, which is a reduction of 94 positions to the governor's budget, or 100, as Malcolm just noted, 191 full-time equivalents over last year's budget, or the current year's budget.
So we've had a reduction of almost $2 billion in excise tax, and we've lost $1 billion in truck weight fees, and you're only assuming 94 reductions FTEs?
That is this year's reduction on top of 3,500 FTE reduction over the last 9 years. That is all based on the reduction of revenue.
And what is the total amount of Caltrans employees at this point?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but this particular program has reduced 27%.
The capital program for project delivery, or the entire department?
Whatever the transportation funding plan was supposed to fund, what would that be as far as the employee load?
So the budget covers all of our employees, which is, I believe, POB, persons on board, just under 20,000. The additional information and specificity that comes in the May revise is the capital outlay support, the resources needed to deliver the capital program. And that number is 9,200 or 9,400, somewhere in that range. What is it? Well, that's POB, that's not your FTEs, correct? Yeah, so 8,100 staff, but the FTEs is 9,600.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then we'll move right into item 19.
So on item 19, I was asked to give just a brief background on a few federal items, specific federal items, and I'll go through those again as succinctly as I can. The first is just a general overview of the Federal Act. It provided $305 billion for transportation across the country over 5 years, largely consistent with the policies laid out in MAP 21. Not providing a whole lot of new funding except for in the new trade corridor program. And for the last decade, and actually even before that, moving all the way back to T21, which was the Federal Act before Safety Lou, which was the Federal Act before MAP 21. We've maintained about a 60-40 split of the revenues between state and local agencies. And as you heard earlier today, we've been working with local agencies to finalize the split for the new act, and working very closely with that number to maintain a 60-40 split, so there are no winners and losers. As I discussed in the prior item, and as Undersecretary Annis discussed before, there is a different proposal for the new freight funds, but that's being sent off to the policy committees for discussion. I just talked about the fast lane stuff. So just to give you a general overview, we have two grant programs that were recently sent forth by the Federal Highway Administration. On March 2nd, there was a notice of funding opportunity for fast lane grants, and on February 23rd, a notice of opportunity for Tiger grants. These are different grant programs that together represent about $1.4 billion nationally that transportation agencies across the country can compete for funding on a national level. The chart above shows what we know about in terms of projects that were submitted to Federal Highways Administration from California. There were 24 requests for the fast lane grants, totaling $4.9 billion in project costs, and requesting $1.1 billion in the federal grant monies. It's worth noting that is greater than the total pot for the entire nation, which was $900 million for this program. On the Tiger side, which are slightly more broad grants, not restricted necessarily to freight, there were 27 total applications that we know about for $1.6 billion in total project cost and $641 million for the federal grant piece. That is also greater than the total pot available for the entire country, which is about $500 million. The timelines at the bottom show that we needed to submit requests for the fast lane grants by April 14th, about a month and a half after the NOFO came out. And Tiger grants are due April 29th. I think they've already been submitted. Obligations are required by the end of 2019, and they each have different completion requirements. Construction must begin within 18 months of the grant for fast lane, or I'm sorry, of obligation for fast lane, and the funds must be expended by September 2024 for Tiger grants. And then the last thing I was going to talk about was the repurposing of earmarks. This is another notice of opportunity that the Federal Highway sent out on March 8th, issuing guidance for implementation of earmark repurposing. Division of Local Assistance sent out a really well written letter that explained that despite the large numbers that were bandied about when the NOFO came out, there's really only about $100 million to $200 million that is available for repurposing. In order to be repurposed, a earmark must be at least 10 years old, and you have to have either less than 10% of the funding obligated, or if you have more than 10% obligated, the project must be closed out and completed and still have OA left over. So local assistance has determined that the maximum amount that could meet these criteria is about $200 million. Projects proposed for reutilizing these funds must be eligible for one of the apportionments we call the Surface Transportation Grant Program. That's the most flexible of federal resources, and they have to be within 50 miles of the original earmark, which is, I think, unfair for California, given our size. Some states aren't even that big. But nonetheless, that is our the requirements. Vince, you should fix that if you could. And of course, this is only available for this year. It's a limited time offer, and requests must be made to Federal Highways by September 12th. And that is the end of my presentation. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Yeah, Stephen, quick question. On the fast lane and the Tiger grants, is there some sort of scoring system? I mean, we've got a ton of projects that have been submitted that total all those numbers, 24, 27, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Do we prioritize that? Does the federal government prioritize?
We do not. So each agency, transportation agency, whether it be Caltrans or a small transportation agency, can submit 3 projects. So these are all the projects submitted by all the agencies in California. How the feds score them is, that's the list that was provided. How the feds score them is well beyond my scope of knowledge. But there are scoring guidelines, obviously, that the feds would apply to choose the projects on a national level. And I'm afraid I can't offer much more beyond that.
Commissioner Gometti, we had a long list of projects that we considered for our submittal of fast lane. We used the criteria laid out in the fast lane project and tried to score all those projects to find the most competitive projects. We had more than 3 competitive projects, but we were limited to 3, and we tried to find the most competitive projects within California. So we looked very closely at that criteria to try to narrow it down to which 3 projects we were going to submit as a state, and we did do that. We also wrote letters of support to the other projects that were submitted by other agencies. We want to maximize our opportunity to compete for federal dollars as a state.
Mr. Chair, couple of things. You noted that our list is not necessarily comprehensive because this list of 24 are the ones that you all are aware of. If other entity put one in, they may not. So I think we should all collectively reach out to all of our various partners and make sure at least we get one master list so we can have our eyes and get our arms around the magnitude of what kind of requests are out there. It will help us as we all try to figure out what our freight future is going to look like. And then also going forward, we're going to be asked to do this again, and while this was a very short window and the projects that each entity selected, they used the window and the guidelines they had, but we've got to be getting ourselves queued up so we're ready for the next ask, and we can work collectively to make sure that we do get our fair share. So I think we shouldn't sit back and wait for the next NOFA to come out, but we should continue to kind of get this process percolating a little better so that we do when anybody sneezes, we're ready to go and say, this is what we'll do for you, and this is, how quickly we can do it. And then lastly, on the FAST Act implementation, which was our heading, we are going to have to update our state freight plan to be FAST Act compliant. And the biggest, by December 4th, 2014, is that right? Or 2017, excuse me, yeah. 2014, it'd be tough to go back and get that one. But the biggest thing is it requires prioritization. And that's going to be a lot of work for all of us to come together and agree, because our current Department of Transportation freight plan has basically 700 projects, if I recall right. So I would encourage us, because it took us a better part of a year to comply with the Lowenthal bill. So I think we're going to have to start on this. And it's also the whole sustainable freight discussion, I think, plays into that in terms of how do we, but we don't want to get ourselves in a position where we're not eligible for those formula funds.
I think those are all good points. I think we can go back to that freight management plan, California Freight Mobility Plan, and also use that forum to continue on the details that you just talked about.
Thank you. Okay. Laura, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Commissioners, this is tab 20. This is an information item where we're presenting the staff recommendations for the 2016 STIP. We've received many letters from stakeholders regarding these recommendations. They're included in your book, including some late yellows and also late pinks. So we've received a lot of letters. The actual staff recommendations can be found under tab 21. As required by statute, the recommendations were made available to the Commission, Caltrans, and regional agencies at least 20 days prior to STIP adoption. They were distributed on April 22nd. A hard copy was also presented for each commissioner. It had a purple copy, if you're not sure which one that was. So the 2016 STIP covers the 5-year period from 16-17 through 2021, adding the 2 new years, 1920 and 2021. The 2016 fund estimate was originally adopted in August and then was amended in January 2016. This amendment shows that the first years of the 2016 STIP period that were carried over from the 2014 STIP are over-programmed by $1.5 billion, and that there is no new capacity. In fact, the capacity is negative, meaning that $754 million in project funding must be deleted, while an additional $755 million must be delayed to the last 2 years. So regional agencies and Caltrans were asked to submit revised programs to delete and delay. The revised proposals were presented at the STIP hearings in March 2016. The combined proposals offered approximately $515 million in deletions and $351 million in delays. Therefore, staff had to find an additional $240 million to delete and over $400 million to delay. And as you can imagine, it was not an easy process. So what we have before you in the next item is where the actual recommendations are. Basically, these are based on, of course, the need to delay or delete. We decided to propose no new projects because we were not to the level of deletions that were required. Project cost increases were incorporated only in the early years of the 2016 STIP, where we may need to allocate those before the next round of funds. We attempted to meet geographic equity, and I feel that we did do that. We kept the north and south deletions equitable to the amount of programming they actually had. In addition, we actually, the ITIP is actually offering up a little bit more. They're deleting 26.3% of the total deletions. So we worked through those items. We negotiated with all the regional agencies and Caltrans to the extent possible to make sure that their priorities were taken into account. In general, what we've done is, of course, we've managed to find the delays and deletions that were required. We have delayed almost everything that was programmed in 16-17 because our expectation is that at 9.8 cents we will not have much of an allocation capacity. And we did achieve, as I said, the geographic equity. between the north and the south. So we have carefully crafted these recommendations to program the capacity available by fiscal year, consistent with the fund estimate. Where staff recommendations differ from the original RTIP or ITIP proposal, we showed that with a shaded area. In most cases, we were delaying stuff beyond where they wanted it. Since the recommendations were distributed on the 22nd, we have received information from the regions that were some errors and some late changes. Those are outlined in attachments A and B of the resolution under tab 21. And we have actually a more recent one. We gave you a yellow and then we gave you a pink because we were getting changes literally up to the last minute. So what we have is that we total the annual fund estimate limits through 2021. If we make any changes to add or advance, we must have a compensating deletion or delay in the same year and in the same amount to stay within the fund estimate limits. Once adopted, there may be a need for additional changes or corrections. We do occasionally make mistakes. As with past STIPs, the proposed adoption resolution includes a clause that would authorize staff, in consultation with Caltrans and the regions, to make further technical changes, with any and all substantive changes brought back to the Commission for approval. In addition, we have added a clause to the resolution stating that the Commission's intent is that priority in the next programming round will be given, 1, to cost increases that were not incorporated this time, and 2, projects that were deleted without prejudice, that they would be able to come back, and then 3, new projects that may be prioritized by the regions. Staff plans to include also language in the 2018 STIP guidelines, in the specific guidelines, outlining further details about how we would propose that in the next STIP. I would, just in conclusion, like to thank all the regions and Caltrans, been very helpful working with us. It has not been easy. And also Teresa Favila for doing most of the work. It's been very helpful. So this is an information item. We will have the adoption under tab 21, and I'm sure we have a lot of speakers.
Okay, we have several speakers. We'll call them up. I'll call a couple, 3 names so you can get in line. We have 2 minutes, and we have technology. So we'll start with Michael Zeller, and then go to Daryl Johnson.
Good afternoon, Chair Alvarado and members of the Commission. I'm Michael Zeller. I'm a Principal Transportation Planner with the Transportation Agency for Monterey County. First off, I'd like to thank Laurel and CTC staff for working with our agency and all the regional agencies in developing the revised STIP. I appreciate the difficult funding decisions that the staff and the Commission have to make with the current transportation funding crisis. Our agency submitted a comment letter that should have been distributed to you today. There's a few key issues that I'd like to highlight. So when the Commission adopted the revised fund estimate in January, our agency was asked to cut $7 million from our program, which our board approved cutting that $7 million of projects out of our program. We also met with our legislative delegation to urge them to pass a solution to the funding crisis. After that, CTC staff did notify us that we would have an additional $9.1 million cut out of our program for a total of $16.1 million. So with our program only being about $70 million, to reduce it by about 23%, as been mentioned, it's pretty painful to accommodate those cuts. So in light of this, there are 3 key issues that raised in our letter. Gotcha. The first is that one of our projects, the Highway 1 Operational Improvement Projects, has been recommended for delay. We'll be submitting an AB 3090 request, so we hope to get Commission support on that. We also support staff's recommendation to provide priority for projects that were cut in the future STIPs if funding does become available. And lastly, one of our projects, the Highway 68 Corral de Tierra project, was also set for construction this year. That has been delayed. So as has been discussed by staff, we also support giving consideration for any delay-related construction cost increases. So again, I understand the many difficult choices, but I appreciate your consideration of these issues. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Daryl Johnson, and then Ray Wolf.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Daryl Johnson with the Orange County Transportation Authority. Just a couple of comments, and I'll stay within my 2 minutes. We do recognize that this is a discussion you don't want to have today. You would prefer to be having a different discussion. But Susan, you and your team have done everything you needed to do to facilitate this. Just a couple of comments on it. 10 years ago, OCTA's STIP program was $392 million, and by any fathom of escalation, the simplest escalation you could come up with, we should be close to $500 million today over the last 10 years. Where we find ourselves, instead of $500 million, is 2 years ago we found ourselves at about $170 million, and in February you asked us to go to $128 million, and then since February you've asked us to go to $122 million. So I think about the $360 million gap. I'm disappointed about the $60 million reduction in the last 2 months, but I think it's really more important to think about the $360 million gap and what that could have done in a county like Orange with 3.2 million people. That could have been a light rail project, that could have been a massive freeway improvement project, that could have been an HOV project. It could have been any number of things that we could do. A couple of things, we have accommodated your request. There was one policy area that we would just express some concern on. We did prioritize our projects, and we did propose to add one new project, and we did that within the scope of our required cuts. And I understand your policy is to not add new projects, and there's probably some reasoning to that, but it does allow us, it forces us not to do a safety project on a rail bridge in South Orange County that carries the second busiest passenger rail corridor in the nation with Amtrak and Metrolink, nearly 8 million passengers a year. There, we will look at $27 million of other funds not being made available to that project. We will either delete it entirely or rescope it. I would ask for your consideration to allow us to work within the target that you've provided us and allow us to pick our projects as opposed to just a blanket decision of no new projects. We'd be happy to work with the commission staff to reconsider that if that is of your liking. In addition, we have about a $500 million freeway improvement project in South Orange County. It has $78 million of STIP funds on it. In February, you asked us to delay that 1 year. Last month, you asked us to delay that another year. The escalation cost alone on a project of that magnitude is over $60 million when we look at where we think it's going to be over the next 4 to 5 years. So you're, again, understanding what your requirements are, but just to let you know, we think $50 to $60 million in delay cost on a project of $500 million over that period of time. So with that, I would hope that in the future we're here having a different discussion about new projects. We again value the hard work that you're doing. Would ask for your consideration on opportunities for advance if funds become available, and reconsider your policy on the one new project that we're proposing to add. Thank you for your time.
Question. Regarding the project that would cost more money if you built it later, wouldn't you have to agree though that every project we're cutting is probably going to cost more money later?
Generally speaking, Commissioner Earp, I think that is the case. I also think it's important to realize the funding mix, and when you look at $80 million against a $500 million project, my guess is when we come back 4 years from now, the local sales tax measure will be eating the additional cost and the STIP dollar amount will stay the same. So it's disproportionately impacting that partnership of funds. So yes, it will increase, but they need to increase together, and we need to acknowledge that it is an additional cost.
Okay, so we're acknowledging that, but you don't really have a solution. You're just pointing out the fact that it really sucks, right?
That's a great word. It really sucks. But it does cost more. It will increase more. And we have to determine whether we can do anything to keep that on track. And we have done as local agencies, particularly in Orange County, I believe so much over the last 5 to 8 years to keep projects on track. I hate to say it, but we might be out of tricks in terms of how we can keep projects on. So we've said it before, we've solved it with advancing local funds, and I just don't know if we can do it again. So I think this is a real opportunity, or a real issue of delay as opposed to a fake issue of delay. And I wanted to make sure the commission knows that.
We definitely know it, believe me. Thank you, though.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to just direct this at you, Darrell, but since you brought it up, you know, that you spoke eloquently, but you're speaking to the wrong choir here. You know, I think we all agree with you. I'll tell you where I'm a little disappointed in the various agencies around the state. I see a lot of letters go back and forth, but there's been really very little personal contact by you and others in the room with their elected officials, and that's where we have to make a point. Not to this group who agrees with you wholeheartedly, but you know, I talk to people. Well, we sent a letter in. You know how many people read those letters? Hardly anyone. It just goes right in the wastepaper basket. But making an appointment with those elected officials in your district, in Orange County and other areas, that's where you're going to make a point. Show them the list. All these projects are going to get eliminated if they don't get off their ass and approve something. And that's where the problem lies, right? It's simple as that. Well, anyway,
I don't
not
disagree
directed
that
at you,
we're,
it's with everyone else in the room.
I will take that challenge. I view that as a challenge, and I think that we do need to talk to a different audience, and we're going to do more of that. Orange County, I think you will see us over the next couple of months talking about the impacts of the STIP as well as challenges with the sales tax program, and we'll do our best to carry that message forward.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darrell, this really also isn't for you in particular, but it is sort of fair warning to everyone, I think, out in the audience. This is not going to get easier sooner. This is only going to get harder, faster. And I think if there's an opportunity to create local control of local funding, and you and I have had this talk on many, many occasions, for those projects out there that can create managed lanes, that can create those express lanes, and then control their local funding and create basically new local control revenue based upon the policies and the processes that we have now. I challenge everybody in this state to start looking at those a lot faster than we are and have an interconnected system where that's the revenue. I mean, we know in Southern California the magic numbers are 11, 14, 75. 11% of our funding comes from the feds, 14 from the state, 75 local controlled funding. That 75's got to get bigger, and it'll never get as big as the good old days, but I think that's the only way we're going to start satisfying our local constituency. So anyway, I'm here to work with you, and you know that. So
I do. Yes, Commissioner Dunn, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray Wolf and Courtney Smith.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chair Frazier. I'm Ray Wolf, speaking on behalf of the San Bernardino Associated Governments. I'd like to voice concerns over the criteria established for managing the 2016 STIP to meet the funding constraints that we've all heard about, and the direct impacts to our program in San Bernardino County. Our concerns are detailed in a letter, and Commissioner Gilmetti, we have been talking to our local delegation because we understand the importance of this and the challenges that we're all facing in this conversation. But that letter was distributed to you as part of your package today. The STIP proposal for San Bernardino County is our third attempt to corral the changing face of the STIP. Our first submittal was intended to be responsive to known programming capacity reductions in the early years and to the governor's executive order to reduce greenhouse gases. After the revision to the fund estimate and the need to reduce the STIP programming by $754 million, we made an honest effort to do our part in helping the Commission to meet their deprogramming needs. Our proposal met our deprogramming target of $37 million and moved $100 million out of the first 3 years of the STIP. Because the same effort was not made statewide, Commission staff had to develop criteria to remove an additional $239 million based on objective criteria rather than local agency priorities or county shares. Since all of our proposed projects were new, again, as we were attempting to meet current GHG reduction goals, our entire proposal would have been deleted under these criteria. We appreciate Commission staff efforts in allowing us to prepare a third proposal that reinserted only current STIP projects. This proposal continued to meet our deprogramming target and removed $103 million of programming from the first 3 years. However, to meet the constraints, Commission staff recommends removing an additional $26 million from our programming. This translates to a reduction of nearly 50% in San Bernardino County. It's the highest dollar amount in the state, and it's the highest percentage in the southern part of the state when factoring in the 2014 STIP projects remaining to be voted. It's almost twice our target share of deprogramming. We understand that the staff recommendation balances deprogramming between the north and the south. We also understand that the deprogramming targets were merely targets and that some counties were not able to meet these requirements because of lack of programming. However, the deprogramming proposed by Commission staff disproportionately impacts San Bernardino County. And I'll skip to the end here very briefly. We do not support staff's recommendation for San Bernardino County's STIP programming reduction because our county is shouldering the burden for other counties that did not make a requisite effort to assist the commission in the deprogramming needs. We respectfully request that you reinstate full funding for the I-10 project, adding back approximately the $25 million that I spoke of that was additionally taken from our county. San Bernardino should not be left with the crumbs of the toast that was mentioned earlier today. Thank you.
Quick question. Why was San Bernardino hit so bad within the Southern California region?
I'm not sure.
There was some, I understood that there was a more balanced, more, how do I say this diplomatically? More favor was given to LA for some existing contracts. LA County got a larger share, as opposed to balancing north-south within the Southern California region. There may have been counties that got more than they thought they were getting cut. Is that part of the issue here, Ray?
That is part of the issue, but I'll defer to staff to
Okay.
answer that question more.
That would be helpful too.
Yes, Commissioner. In the South region, particularly in the Skag region, the counties all over deleted except for Los Angeles and Imperial, both of which have only one project left in the STIP. And in the case of Los Angeles, that is a project where we really asked them to cash flow that out because we couldn't afford to do the allocation in any 1 year. And that's a project where they've already obligated, they already have contracts to purchase those vehicles. And it was at our request, really, that they spread those repayments out, in effect, programmed on a cash flow basis. So we didn't feel that it was fair to ask them to delete it after making that obligation.
But it's more fair, it's not fair for them maybe, but then it impacts everybody else. So, and that's not fair. What else would you have, what else could you have done? I mean, look, everybody should hurt, right?
Right.
Everybody needs to hurt in this process.
And we took both highway projects out of LA. So they did, they are the second highest county with deletions at 55 million in the state. And what we took was their only last two highway projects, and we did basically force those deletions on them.
Commissioners, in LA, it's my understanding, and Laurel, you correct me, but when they came in, we technically, at their request, should have allocated 100% of those funds 2 years ago. Is that?
Well, we programmed the last portion of that 2 years ago for them to exercise an option. And again, what we have asked to do is to spread that out because it is such a large allocation need in any 1 year because it's a several $100 million project.
And so this goes into our cash flow problem, not a programming problem, but as the revenues don't come in. So for example, this year we had a cost allocation plan. We weren't able to fund all the projects that we programmed in the current year. And so we had a delivered but not allocated list. And so when the programming capacity doesn't line up with the funds available, we have, we run into situations where in this case LA agreed to take the programming over time when they technically, under the share constraints of the STIP, we could have not done that. And we probably, looking back, that would be where we, as a commission, had made a commitment to LA.
Well, I just hope that there is some consideration, because this is, as I said, this is only going to get worse. So in the next round, that we remember what LA has benefited from, if you will, call this a benefit, and it's not as painful, those additional cuts for the rest of the Southern California region.
Right. Well, and one thing we did not do is we did not delete shares. So all of these remain as unprogrammed balance. And to the extent we have capacity in the next STIP, all of those would be available for programming for whatever project the region decides to bring forward. But again, bottom line, it depends on us having the capacity. Although the shares are there, available to be programmed, we need the money to program against.
I'm not even thinking of capacity. I'm thinking of future additional cuts and delays. And that's why I just wanted consideration for the guys that up front took bigger shares of cuts and delays than others within a geographic region. That's all I'm asking for.
I understand.
Randy, then, Jim.
Well, it seems to me like what you're saying, Laurel, is at one point we kicked the can down the road to kind of spread out our amortization of our payments, and so now we're caught with kind of over leveraged, so to speak, if I put it in a homeowner's terminology. But, you know, and we've got huge issues with the size of the sandbag. I mean, it is one huge region. We also have huge poverty issues there and a non-attainment air district. So it's, I know it's not your fault, you were in a very, very tough position, but I think to Commissioner Dunn's point, if we do have to go the way we are and we can't miraculously find money from heaven, which sometimes we do through this process. I was looking at you, Chairman Frazier, but anyway, I think that we have to find a way to really recognize these really drastic cuts we've made. And then to Daryl's slide or his discussion about where we ought to be, I mean, that's what Daryl said to me was like we're at 25% of where we normalized would have been. And that's even more draconian, and as Commissioner Dunn says, it's going to get worse. So we've got to do something, folks, because we're stuck, and I don't know what the answer is, and there obviously is no easy answer, as we've all found. But I do think with our recommendations as a part of this, that those folks that we recognize really took a pretty, they got a butch haircut, that we've got to somehow make it that we can maybe catch that up. And you're going to be drinking pina coladas on the beach somewhere, right,
Yeah.
girlfriend?
But I'll leave that direction before I leave.
And unicorns.
Considering that we have an equivalent amount of projects that are basically been pushed down, and if we don't reach a solution, we're going to be right back here figuring out how we're going to cut those. So we're all going to be wearing skinhead, haircuts, I think. But it seems to me that, I mean, as part of what we're considering here, there's this thought process of how to prioritize projects that have been cut, and that they could come back without prejudice, that they would have a priority and so forth, which is all good. I have no issue with that from a fundamental concept standpoint, but it seems that if we are fortunate enough to get some money somewhere, that a county that had taken a bigger hit, we should tweak that a little bit so that could be accounted for, because I don't think we can fix, in my opinion, we can't fix what Ray's problem is right now.
Right.
But if we get additional money, we ought to figure out a way to fix some of that and write it as best we can. This is a very imperfect process, because we can't just take the amount of money and slice it up exactly right for everybody, because you're talking about chunks of money for projects. So I get what you're saying. I think we need to figure out how we can address that on the next round. It also works the other way, I think, that if we actually end up having to cut more next time around instead of getting any money, that we need to go back to counties that already got whacked a little bit more and say, okay, we need to figure out a way to whack you less. It could be, in the worst case scenario, that you're no better off than you are now, but everybody else is going to be worse off too, so we can all be miserable together. But I wish I could be more positive, but I've had more conversations lately with legislators, and the gist of it is basically, look, this is where the rubber finally meets the road. We've been talking about this for 3 years. There's been inaction, and guess what? It's for real, and we're not doing this to make a statement. We're doing this to try to balance the books. And anybody that tries to accuse the CTC of doing some political stunt ought to go get their head examined, because the last thing we want to do is throw around projects like this to make a statement. So we're doing something we don't want to do, and I do appreciate you bringing up your particular issue, because I think it needs to be addressed in how we try to move this down the road.
Thank you.
Okay, now caution. The last two speakers went over 3 minutes. Okay, so now it's time where I get to be rude. Okay, so when I tell you to stop, just stop. Agreed?
You betcha.
Okay, and then commission itself too. We're all repeating things that we've said before. So let's kind of watch ourselves on that. We're already pushing our time for the day. Courtney Smith, and then Kenneth Cow.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Courtney Smith, and I work as a transportation planner for the Inyo County Local Transportation Commission. The Inyo County LTC primary concern is the deletion of programming for a $1.5 million project, the South Lake Road Rehabilitation Project. The project leverages almost $11 million in federal funding. The no new policy, no new project policy, which we completely understand, should be waived in this instance since the project is already, the county has entered into a federal agreement for the programming of the project. And two, Inyo County has exceeded its STIP share deletion targets by $12.3 million, which is okay. We understand that, but we'd like to get this small project. In addition, ITIP funds totaling $35.4 million for the Olancha-Cartago project in Inyo County were deleted, which is 19% of the total statewide ITIP deletion target. Our commission also followed the wishes of Caltrans District 9 and programmed far more than our share for the Freeman Gulch MOU project on State Route 14 in Kern County. The South Lake Road project is a competitive grant, and Inyo County would not be able to fund the match without assistance from the STIP. The project only requires $112,000 for design in 16-17 and $1.369 million for construction in 17-18. The notes portion of the STIP share table says that the South Lake can be programmed in a later STIP cycle. This is certainly not the case with the design component, and the project puts the not programming construction puts the project in a difficult time. Please approve the programming for the South Lake Road match project. Thanks for your consideration and any questions.
Questions?
Yes, just one. I'm going to build on Commissioner Arp's comments. Mr. Smith, this is painful for all of us. Who represents Inyo County in the State Assembly and State Senate?
In the State Assembly, it's Devin Mathis, and in the State Senate, it's Senator Berryhill. And I believe the county and the city of Bishop have contacted with concerns about transportation. But I hear and second your the notion that there's a comment needs to be communicated with the legislators.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Ken? And then Anthony Cepeda.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kenneth Cow with MTC. I first maybe want to thank Daryl and Ray since they did the heavy lifting. I was kind of also going to mention that in the MTC region, we've had over almost 50% of our tip cut. And so we did want to just make a note of that. We do have a letter in your packet that discusses kind of the numbers and how they shook out as they relate to the MTC region. And I did also want to mention to Commissioner Gilmetti's concern, we have been very active in meeting with our legislators, one of whom is in the room today, to try to affect action and to fix this one, yes. Right. So again, thank you, and thank you very much to staff for working with us during this difficult process, and we hope to find a solution very soon. Thank you.
Ken, don't walk away, please. Thank you. Thanks for your work and your letter as well. You've met with all the delegation. We have several pieces of legislation that the Commission is supporting, at least in concept, for funding. Was any member of the 9-county MTC delegation not on board with those?
I think there might have been one or two, but I'd have to check with our legislative staff on exactly what their concerns were.
Okay. If you can find out and come back up later and tell us who, I'd like to know who on the record, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Cepeda, and then Stephen Dobler, if you're still interested.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Anthony Cepeda, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Here today to not preach to the choir, but hopefully to align with the commission and share our pain. We're all experiencing the same pain. There aren't any easy solutions, but at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, we are very committed to working with our partner agencies to address the challenges of this fiscal crisis and to continue working with CTC staff and our local agencies in putting together solutions to get through this as fruitfully as we can. Thank you.
Anthony?
Yes.
Same question. Have you met with all your legislators in the delegation?
I don't know at that point. I will have to check with the executive staff.
Please do.
I will, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Dobler.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Stephen Dobler, and I'm here today on behalf of my family and the Taylor family. Together, our families are the farmers and landowners of the agricultural farm ground on which the proposed San Benito County Highway 156 widening project is scheduled to be built. I'm here actually to support staff's recommendation to delay the funding for 3 years or until 2020, specifically for this particular project in San Benito County. The delay will allow ourselves and others valuable time to work with Caltrans to adequately address some issues which have not been adequately addressed, specifically minimizing the loss of a prime agricultural farm ground and the proposed ingress and egress onto the new road. The ingress and egress raises serious safety concerns, which ironically was one of the reasons for the project in the beginning. So to that end, our families would again like to support the recommendation to delay 3 years or until 2020 the funding for the proposed San Benito County Highway 156 widening project specifically.
Thank you. Very good. Roll right into item 21.
Yes, Commissioners, that does take us into item 21. Again, as I mentioned, we have added some language into the adoption resolution. And at this time, including your yellow and pink, we did change some attachments in there with late changes. Staff would recommend your approval of the STIP.
So moved.
Motion by Gilmetti, second by Tavaloni. Any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So just one thing, as I mentioned earlier, the Regents did have a requested addition to the resolution language, and that is following section 2.9 to include a reference to the list of deleted projects in the 2016 STIP. The language is, be it further resolved, the Commission will publish a list of projects that have been deleted and will either be resubmitted or replaced with a new project based on the above regional priorities. This is a request that the regions have as an addition to the STIP resolution.
Nice.
Yeah, Commissioners, I would just add to that we are publishing the list already. It will be published today. It will be linked on our website. You have a copy of the recommendations. Once the STIP is adopted, it would be the adopted list, and those will be posted today already. So it's to you to decide if you want to add that language, but we are already planning to post those lists.
Get it done. Posted. Okay? Thank you. I mean, I think read this resolution and post it if we're gonna.
Well, the request was that there could be a reference to the list within the resolution. We understand that you're publishing the list, but there's no reference to the list in the resolution.
So Commissioners, the Commission staff recommendations already include a list of all the projects. It's just by county. And so what Sarkis is requesting is just a long list, which we will have published. So for purposes of this resolution, the staff recommendations set forth by county all the deleted and delayed projects already. So this recommendation does not appear necessary. Unless, you'd like to have a separate list attached.
You have a motion and a second.
All right. So somebody call for the question. Call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 22.
Commissioners, at your discretion, I can skip this presentation on the Active Transportation Program Fund Estimate with a two-sentence presentation. The Active Transportation Program Fund Estimate was put together in association with CTC staff. The funding is about $3.1 million per year greater than the funding in the prior Active Transportation Program Fund Estimate due to higher federal funding levels. The amount is $122.7 million a year for each year in the Active Transportation Fund Estimate. And we recommend the Commission adopt the fund estimate as published in the book item.
Move.
All right.
I'm moving. Setting the recommendation.
Second by Yvonne. Motion by Yvonne, second by Commissioner Dunn. Further questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Now we're going to, before we skip to item 24, will somebody check on the progress of our meeting outside?
They're getting very close.
Well, we'll put some pressure on it and let them know that we need to hear from them by 4:30. Okay, item 24. Eric.
Yes, Commissioners, so we're just postponing item 23, and we'll do that next, I understand. Is that correct? Okay, so item 24.
Sorry, 24.
Yes. So item 24, as you all know, Assemblymember Frazier's AB 194 delegated to the Commission the legislative responsibility to approve the tolling of transportation facilities in California. We received our first application, the Commission did, from Orange County Transportation Authority on April 1st. And to present that project is District Director Mr. Chamberlain and OCTA Director Daryl Johnson.
Thank you, Commission. My name is Ryan Chamberlain. I'm the District 12 Director for Caltrans. I want to start off by thanking the Commission for hosting the public hearing down in Costa Mesa last month. Certainly appreciate that. And I can't think of a better project to utilize, to be the first out of the gate to utilize AB 194. This project is in alignment with Caltrans' mission to provide a safe, sustainable, integrated, and efficient transportation system to enhance California's economy and livability. This project will enhance regional mobility, will relieve HOV degradation that's happening on the 405 corridor, and deliver on our promise to FHWA to work hard to relieve degradation. This project will utilize pricing to manage congestion. This project will incentivize carpooling, van pooling, and mass transportation within the corridor and adjacent arterials. This project will provide additional funding for operations and maintenance and other system improvements needed in the corridor in the future. This project will provide a choice for those that choose to take it to provide a free flow commute from point A to point B within the corridor on the 405. This project is consistent with SCAG's prior regional transportation plan and their recently adopted regional transportation plan, and is a key component of their managed lane network within that plan itself. This project would not have moved forward if it wasn't for the partnership between Caltrans, OCTA, our federal partners, FHWA, local and regional agencies, the business community, and trade organizations. I want to emphasize the partnership and how we work successfully to move this project forward. And in the spirit of this partnership, I'd like to introduce Daryl Johnson, the CEO of Orange County Transportation Authority, to provide you with more details on the project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan. As Ryan indicated, this has been a project that we've worked collaboratively on for more than a decade. And today, what you're doing is groundbreaking. We wouldn't be here today without the ability, we wouldn't be here today without Assembly Bill 194. And we should make no mistake that this is a significant authority that's been granted to local agencies and Caltrans to really change the face of transportation in the state of California. And we're very excited on behalf of OCTA, working with Caltrans District 12, to be asking for that first authority under your purview. Leading up to today, OCTA has hosted literally hundreds of public meetings on this project with members of the public, with stakeholders, with transportation officials, and elected leaders along the corridor. And make no mistake that we've received valuable input along the way. There's been tough conversations about what the project is, how it will be managed, but all of that has been very valuable input. This will allow us to embark upon, your approval today will allow us to embark upon the largest transportation project in the history of Orange County. It's fully funded. You should have an update today that was provided by your executive director that updates the cost estimate. For information, of course, we're not asking you for any money on this. We're asking for your approval and your blessing, if you will, to go forward. I'd like to go over a few features of the project, but I'm not sure how to work the PowerPoint, so maybe I found it. So, but I'm not sure where to point it. The screen.
Point it to your forehead.
Yeah, that's, you probably get me to do that, so. It's the wrong one. There's two of them up here, evidently. So, all right, let's try this again. I'm not going to go death by PowerPoint, but I do want to give you some highlights of the project and give you the opportunity to answer some questions. The project, as you see here, is about 16 miles in length. It goes from Costa Mesa to essentially Long Beach, which is the Los Angeles County line. The corridor itself is the busiest section of highway in the United States of America. When you get to the top portion of the corridor, that part that is left to right, between the 22, 405, and 605, average daily traffic routinely approaches 400,000 vehicles per day. This is something that we're obviously trying to fix and deal with. Peak periods, anybody that drives this corridor, who has driven the corridor once or many times, will know that there's significant need for additional capacity on the freeway. Both the general purpose and the existing high occupancy vehicle lanes, which have been in place since 1989, by the way, are severely congested throughout the peak, many hours of the day, and they have degraded over time, as you've all heard many times before. The mainline freeway has operational and geometric deficiencies. If I went back to that map quickly, you can see the freeway is on a skew over a grid network, which presents significant challenges in construction and right-of-way and project delivery. All of the interchanges have what we call operational, geometric, and storage deficiencies, which are impacting local cities' ability to move traffic within their street network as well. And incident management, if there is an incident, being able to deal with that in this very congested corridor is extremely difficult. So very quickly, the purpose of the project is to reduce congestion. That's an obvious one. But we also want to enhance operations and increase mobility, including trip reliability. So this idea that when you make a trip on the corridor, you know how long it's going to take you, you know how it's going to work, and you can plan your day accordingly. And it's very important to us in Orange County that we want to minimize the environmental impacts and the private property impacts. That's built into our sales tax measure, that this project is to be done within limited available right-of-way. And I've added one picture here. This is probably a pretty good day on the 405, but most of the time it looks like that, and that's what we're trying to address. Very quickly on the project description, this is a typical cross-section. As you can see, the highway bridge, or the bridge over the highway, is on a slight skew, and the freeway is underneath. Our sales tax measure will add a local, or what we call a general purpose lane, to the outside of the freeway within the existing right-of-way. That's depicted in yellow. And the express lanes, or the toll lane portion of it, will add an express lane in the middle of the freeway and then be combined with the existing HOV lane. So you have a 2-lane express lane facility in the middle of the freeway. And that'll be for the entire 16 miles. Significant project features, as I mentioned, 1 general purpose lane in each direction. It'll also replace 18 bridges over the course of the corridor. There's 2 ways to replace bridges. One is to replace it just to widen the freeway. What we've chosen to do is when we replace that bridge is to take those bridges to what we call the master plan of arterial highway standards for the local street network. So the maximum capacity over the freeway, as well as adding features for active transportation such as bicycle lanes and pedestrian access as well. We'll do interchange reconfigurations at every local interchange, improvements to the auxiliary lanes, major arterial improvements, drainage improvements, and we are using a design-build method. We anticipate that to be a 6-year project duration. If we weren't using design-build, we would expect that to approach the 10-year mark. So we think we can save about 4 years using design-build in this corridor. Just a quick snapshot of the bridge replacements. Everything that's orange is a bridge replacement. So obviously a very challenging corridor. We're working very hard with our local communities, local cities, to have traffic management plans in place to deal with the construction of that. Which brings me to community outreach. My view on community outreach is there's a minimum and then there's what you should do. And we have chosen in every possible opportunity to do far more than what we should do. We look at our community outreach as ambassadors and liaisons for the project, and we want to really have this idea of a street team going out and working with the local community. As you can see, 9 official public hearings, 1,300 attendees, over 1,300 public comments. We mailed out 190,000 postcards, 18 different newspaper advertisements, over 250 civic presentations. This doesn't count all of the board and committee meetings that occurred at OCTA, which number in the dozens as the project was put together. We have an experienced project team. We're very confident in our ability to deliver the project and as well as operate the express lanes in the future. With District 12 and with Caltrans here in Sacramento, we've delivered projects together in our sales tax measure for over 25 years. We have significant experience on doing the first ever design build project on State Route 22 in Garden Grove on the Garden Grove Freeway. We have managed the 91 express lanes for 13 years, since 2003, and it still stands alone as the highest single agency rated toll facility in the United States. And we have a great depth of experience in financing projects. We have issued over $3 billion in sales tax debt under our first measure. It's all been managed appropriately, and our debt on the 91 express lanes was paid off early and refinanced to modernize it recently and not extend the term of the debt, but just to modernize it and make it more affordable. And then finally, we believe that we've acquired the best in the business for our program management consultants with tolling experience from not only around the state of California, around the country, but around the world. Give you a quick update on the benefits. These are very obvious, but at the same time, we'll give people choices about travel time for all users. This program or project as envisioned will give people a choice to use a toll facility when they need to, at the same time have opportunities for major improvements in the general purpose lane travel times, reducing congestion, enhancing operations, enhancing safety, and frankly improving quality of life. At the end of the day, that's what we want to do, is enhance the quality of life and improve our economic competitiveness in Southern California. Next steps, I'm going to just assume that you will approve this today, and when you do that, we will move on to entering into an OCTA Caltrans operating toll agreement over the course of the next month, and then we will be submitting our formal application to what's known as TIFIA, which will help finance the toll portion of that project, which is about $620 million. We plan to award a design build contract in November of this year. The procurement is underway. 3 firms have been shortlisted. We're using the new authority under Assembly Bill 401 that was passed a few years ago here in California. And as we stand here today, we anticipate to be under construction with a notice to proceed of January of next year, with a notice to proceed for actual construction in May of 2017, a 5-year construction window, and we would have the express lanes opening date. All of our financing documents assume a January 1st of 2023 opening date. And I should note for a moment that I don't take lightly your decision, but I'm very excited that we're here today. So I wanted you to know that when you do approve it or when you do vote on it, we have a whole series of things that are really going to kick into gear immediately. We are ready to go. Our funding is lined up. We're very excited about this, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Jim?
Daryl, just a couple of questions. The 2 lanes, is one going to be dedicated for fast track and one for carpool, or are they interchangeable?
Mr. Commissioner, they will be operated as one facility. So if you can envision those green lanes that I showed there, they would be one facility with plastic delineators between those lanes and the general purpose lanes, and all users would have to have a transponder compliant.
But if you're a carpool, you can use the fast track lanes or whatever you want to call them, right?
Yes. On Monday,
yeah.
This coming Monday, our board of directors will consider a toll policy, and what our finance committee of our board has already approved and what the board will consider would offer 3+ carpools free rides at any time, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And then for the first 3.5 years would have discounts for 2+ carpoolers, and then it would shift into toll paying post 3.5 years.
Okay, I've driven down there, and the carpool lanes really don't work, especially when you go through Los Angeles. And there are 2 people per car. Now, in Northern California along Interstate 80, we go with 3 people per car. Is there any thought of your board requiring 3 persons per car to qualify as a carpool?
We have thought about that a lot, Commissioner, and our current working assumption is that the facility as presented today will open with carpools that are 3 or more to operate for free, 2 2+ carpools will have a free period and a discounted period and a pay period. But at the same time, if the state looks at changing the carpool HOV requirements, we would follow along with that, because we agree with you, 2+ carpools are a challenge.
It is.
There are no further questions, and we'll slide into item 26. Lucy?
No, I just wanted to thank Ryan, especially Ryan Chamberlain from Caltrans District 12, for working very closely with Darrell Johnson on this project. It could not have been done with both of these superlative agencies doing the work. This was very tough. It received a lot of national attention in addition to local attention. It really is state-of-the-art, and the business community stood very strongly in support of these express lanes from the get-go. So I really want to commend your hard work on that.
Are you making a motion?
I am, but we haven't had, are we going to have a presentation on 25? If not, I will move.
25. I don't know why you would need another one.
I will move 25 and support staff's recommendation to approve the toll facility request.
Motion by Lucy and second by Joe Tavallone. Any further questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We're going to get to work right away. Thank you.
And they already had a presentation. Why do you want to see another?
I agree. Don't need it.
Mr. Chair, could we go back to item number 3?
Yes, sir.
I believe the department and the property owners have come to a meeting of the minds and have signed an agreement. And what we do is need a confirmation from the department and the property owners, and then we would withdraw the resolution of necessity.
May we hear from the department first and then the property owner?
Hi, Jennifer Loudon, Division of Right-of-Way and Land Surveys, and we have signed a right-of-way contract with the Prescotts.
We've come to a consensus and want to withdraw our notice to appear in front of you guys, but really appreciate you guys taking the time and taking our project seriously.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, now, I'm trying to read my own writing. We're going to back up to 23. Item 23. I'm writing all over this thing. I can't even read my own writing. Come in.
This is an action item. Staff is assisting.
Cards at the end of that.
To proceed and hear comments on the California Sustainable Green Action Plan. The plan was released by the state agencies for this month and public on July 6th. July of last year, the governor issued an executive order which directed four state departments represented here today to prioritize California's transition to a more efficient and less polluting freight transportation system. Komei Ajise from Caltrans is here to kind of give a really brief overview of it, and then we also have representatives. We have Heather Arias from ARB, John Cotto from the California Energy Commission, and Frank Ramirez from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development to kind of give a super brief overview in terms of their role and how they see that this plan will be implemented by their respective agency.
Thank you. Chair Alvarado, my pleasure to be here today. Komei Ajise for the Department of Transportation. I want to also congratulate Commissioner Inman on being elected the Vice Chair. The work we've done is really a culmination of effort over the last almost a year now to come to where we are with the action plan. Actually, I need to note that in part, some of this is responding to what this commission had been driving in terms of trying to make sure we have a consistent policy set for freight across all agencies, and that's what we've sort of done with this. This effort was actually instigated by the Governor's Executive Order B3215. And I'm going to go through components of the plan. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of freight, which I'm sure the Commission is well aware of. We're going to show some actions that the agencies are going to take, and we will also talk about some of the pilot projects. As Garth has already introduced, I have members of the multi-agency panel that worked on this with me, and they are also willing and available to answer any questions. Freight, we've always known that freight is important, and clearly a third of the jobs and a third of the economy of California depends on freight. This table sort of shows that in a way. We have basically the goose that laid the golden egg is what freight is, but it's also growing and it's under a lot of pressure. The pressure is not just from the fact that we need to be competitive across the globe and across the country, but the pressure is also making sure that freight has a smaller carbon footprint. So that is the balancing that we have. We show that there's going to be a potential growth between now and 2025 of about 25% in volume in freight and about 60% in value in freight. And that's tremendous to contemplate. This chart basically shows some of the dynamics of freight. Oftentimes we see a lot of trucks going through and we assume they're just going through the state. In fact, a lot of our freight is within the state. Some of it is due to some manufacturing, a lot of agriculture, but there's also a lot of freight that comes into California, gets broken down and repackaged. So there's a lot of handling that does happen, and it's always important to understand how freight moves. But clearly 60%, more than half of the freight, is circulating within the state. But all of that has value in terms of how it's moved. I talked about the pressures that we're under. Not only are we growing in terms of volume, we are trying to compete. We're competing on two levels. We're competing in terms of the shippers and the beneficial cargo owners trying to make profit in what they do and be cost competitive. But we also have a competition in terms of our ports being able to compete for that market that is global now, that can go anywhere else to get to the consumers in this country. The tendency for the direction of e-commerce is also putting pressure on faster deliveries, and trying to make sure that our system is able to deliver efficiently becomes also another pressure point that we have to face. The system is strained without question in terms of capacity. And so what do we do? How do we expand that capacity? Where do we get the capacity from? Some of that is going to be through efficiencies, which is compelled by this particular executive order. We're also concerned about the impact of freight movement on communities and the environment. How do we minimize that? And where do we begin to take those action steps to ensure that we have a lighter footprint? That all requires to make progress in all of those fronts and keep track and keep tabs on that pressure. It requires a lot of partnership and collaboration. We've attempted to do that over the last couple of years with the CFAC. More so with this action plan, having this multi-agency panel that's behind me work on it, led by 3 secretaries. We've also broadened the collaborative process that we have addressing this issue. We're looking across disciplines. We have the academics in the room. We're looking across state government, like I said, across industry. We're also looking to the environmental community as well as the community activists to also participate. This is a global issue, and we're looking across. We're actually tracking where goods are coming from, who's moving them, how they're being moved, and how that all ultimately has an impact on both the economy of California and the environment of California. So the executive order basically kicked us off last year, asking that we collaborate as state agencies as the beginning of this conversation, and gave us 3 very clear goals, objectives to deal with. One is to improve freight efficiency. Secondly is to transition to zero-emission technologies, and the third is to increase competitiveness in the freight economy. Now, this slide is for Commissioner Dunn. You always chastised us when you saw all these plans, and you always wondered about, is there a way to bring all of this together? Yeah. And I think we began to do that with this action plan, is where we're beginning to tail all of the various multi-state efforts that touch on freight into one action plan under this governor. And I think that's really one of the takeaways of this effort that we're presenting before you.
I'm just still missing the house logo somewhere. It's supposed to be transportation and housing, that's all.
We need housing. Okay, filled you on that one. What have we done so far? We've done several public workshops, webinars, however we could get at the public on this issue. We've tried in the short time that we have. The governor's EO gave us a mandate to deliver this action plan by July of this year, and we're well on track to get there. We had public outreach late in the fall, last fall, and also we had some outreach earlier this year. And we just put the plan out last week, a couple of weeks ago, and it's in public circulation at this point, which is why we're here, and your comments will be very valuable. In addition, we've engaged multi-stakeholder groups, and those are listed there, the least of which is not the tribal community as well. In an effort to get at freight efficiency, we just didn't have the capacity to do it on our own, so we convened a panel, a working group on freight efficiency strategies, and we brought in Dr. Sperling from UC Davis to lead the effort, and it was convened by the department, and we had Commissioner Inman serve on that panel. I have to acknowledge the work of the commission staff, both the last executive director and your current executive director, and Garth participated very actively on specifically on one of the working papers that came out of this effort. We developed about 6 working papers. Those are not really intended for comments and update. They're really done, but they really helped us to frame the discussion on efficiency that went into the action plan. Those will be posted as well with the plan for folks to look at. And the list of the working papers are on this slide. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read them. One of the key elements of the plan was some guiding principles. We had 10 guiding principles, and it's really the basic, but it was necessary to identify them and frame them and use them to guide the conversation about freight that we are beginning to have. Obviously, the economy is a guiding principle. It features very largely in there. Regional and local support around freight is important. The safety is a big deal. Community impacts, those are the kind of guiding principles. Fix it first. How do we maintain what we currently have? The system that's already churning out a third of the economy. How do we keep that intact and not lose that? And of course, resiliency. Given what we know about the potential of impact of climate on our system, what are we doing to make sure the system is resilient and it can withstand any of these forecasted impacts? Specifically to the mandate in the plan, the 3 things that we were supposed to focus on in the plan that the EO gave us the mandate to focus on. First one being efficiency. We set a target of 25% system efficiency by 2030. Now, it's not an easy thing to try and figure out how do you eke out 25%. In the Caltrans strategic plan, we had set a target of about 10% by 2020, and we felt like we should be able to stretch and do 25% by 2030. Now, the way we've set up this target is to look at the growth in the freight GDP and match that with the reduction of emissions. How do we balance that and make freight more efficient in terms of its carbon output? And that really is what we're going for, given that that's really where the EO was driving us to look at how we can do freight, get it more competitive, get it more productive, but at the same time reduce the carbon footprint. In terms of technology, the idea is to deploy about 100,000 zero-emission vehicles or equipment in the freight industry. Some of those will look like yard trucks and equipment that we use to service freight activities at hubs and ports, but also could include trucks, on-road trucks that have zero emissions. Lastly, not to discount the economy, which is important, to foster the growth of the economy with all of these efforts that we're undertaking to make the freight system more efficient. We have to keep in mind that we also have to make sure that we continue to maintain job protection and do no harm as it's been put. Part of this, and I'm going to skip this slide real quickly, but I want to touch on the fact that the intent here is to begin to look at the policy sets before us, such as the discussion on the FAST Act. How do we use that opportunity to begin to address the policy direction that the action plan is set? So we're making sure while we're in the short term, looking out the long term, we're also focusing on how the short term can begin to affect the path forward. We have 9 action steps in the plan, agency actions and implementation steps, as we call them. These are really the first 2 are you've all had the conversation this morning already about this afternoon already about the first 2. What do we do with funding? How do we distribute the funding to make sure that it's doing what we want it to do? That's what the first 2 talk about. The third action is really emphasizing ways to prioritize projects such that it modernizes the system. And I'm not going to go through all 9 of them, but I want to touch on the 5th one, which is acknowledging the fact that we don't have all of the know-how on freight on our side, on the transportation side. We've broadened that now to bring in ARB, Energy Commission, and GoBiz. Even with that collaborative that we've formed at state level, we still don't have all of the capacities at the table. And so we're looking to go out and create a think tank or some brain trust around freight and begin to energize that discussion. And the intent there is to begin to look for visionary thinking and anticipate where the industry might be going, where technology might be going, and begin to actualize those in how we deliver freight projects. The pilot projects that we've proposed, we had put a call out for pilot projects and received 50 or so pilot project proposals. We basically tried to boil them down to this 3, and you would ask, well, why 3? Really, the intent of the pilot project is not to do every project out there. It's really to create exemplar type projects that can show the path forward in what is possible with freight. And these are, if you look at these projects, they go across silos. They're not just transportation projects. The first one, and if there's any question on this, the Energy Commission, John Cato will talk a little bit more about that if there are any questions on that. It's a biogas for freight vehicles in the valley, understanding that we have material to generate biogas. That's what that is. The 2 projects below that are projects on the transportation system that we're working on, but beginning to look beyond just the natural path that we would take on a capacity for trucks on the system. I get the signal. So there we would be using ITS technology and growing whatever advanced technologies or warning systems are out there to inform truck movements. We have some discussion items. I'm going to skip that. They're on your slides. These are really concepts that are out there, still needing to germinate and be thought through. And then finally, the timeline is before you. We are before you in the middle of the timeline where this will be presented to the ARB board tomorrow. July 6th will be the end of the public comment period, and by the end of July, we hope to submit. The secretaries will submit, hopefully, the plan to the governor. And with that, we're available to take any questions that you might have.
We'll hold the questions till after all of the presenters are done.
That was the presentation.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe the different departments were here to share a couple of words or not. No?
Maybe they should.
Okay, that's great.
Let's demonstrate the collaboration.
You piqued my interest on the biogas. How does that work?
I'm John Cato, the Deputy Director for Fuels and Transportation, Energy Commission. So the biogas concept, for what Comeo mentioned, was one of the concepts or pilots that we were looking at, and it kind of evolved around a kind of a dairy cluster as an example of the opportunities there that could be developed further. And that dairy cluster could be transformed, as a great project example, into a mechanism to provide natural gas. And not only natural gas, but a natural gas to feed actually a mobile application for trucks. And so it's a nice closed system for a fuel source generation, renewable fuel source generation localized and applied to a mobile fleet in which transportation mechanisms over the grapevine or within the valley can be applied. And it has a very good dynamic effect and a very good example of a pilot project that really does have a transformative kind of impact. So
It's going to have to be subsidized to work, I assume, because these trucks aren't burning natural gas right now or methane or whatever the cows are producing out there.
Right. And so it is an innovative technology that still needs to be developed. It's in the research stage, but there is opportunity there. There is an existing platform for heavy-duty trucks. There's a low-NOx engine that plays a very good key role here that could utilize that natural gas. So there is an engine platform that's really available for it, and it's a matter of developing the innovative potential for that pilot project.
So where are we going to get the money to subsidize? Cap and trade or truck weight fees?
So that's a good question. Part of the investment is it could come from part of our program, the Energy Commission. We have a alternative renewable fuel and vehicle technology program that already invests in in-state infrastructure, and this would be a potential prime candidate for such an investment.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. Comey, has an economic impact study been prepared or being prepared or coming along with this so we can see the economic impacts?
I'd like Heather answer that.
Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Aries, Air Resources Board. We have not been able to conduct an economic analysis of the full plan. What we tried to do in the back of the document in Appendix C was provide for the stakeholders any cost and benefit information that we had available for each of the implementation steps. But there are a lot of different implementation steps, including the incentive programs that you, the Commission, approve, that we don't know in the future how you are going to distribute those funds. So we're talking about future actions, and we're not going to try and predict what the Commission would like to do with that funding. We could put a range in there, and that's one of the things we're interested in talking to folks about as we're moving forward as part of the conversation of the draft. But then at that point, if we do the economic analyses, we just have to caveat that it would be ranges. Things like if the Commission chose like these types of projects, it could be this end of the range or that end of the range.
Okay. Think hard on that one, because I think we're going to need it.
Yeah, and I think that, and this is something we're really interested in hearing, we're all interested in hearing, it sounds like folks are more interested in what they believe the costs and benefits would be, not necessarily an overall economic impact. So that's the information we tried to provide if we had it in the back. So we hope that we're providing the information that folks were really looking for.
Well, the goal is to enhance the economy of California, to increase the economy.
Right.
So you still need the metrics in there to show how this will grow. One of the things I find fascinating about, certainly in AQMD in Southern California, is they do these incentive programs and then they never follow up or metric on them. So you've got, for example, they give all these benefits to dry cleaners, and then you never know, they never follow up, the dry cleaner has gone out of business 5 years earlier and whether the benefit happened or not.
Right.
So just having them in isolation without a complete economic analysis or a complete economic study, I think is not really fair or helpful, especially when we have to grow the economy as part of the goals of this plan, in addition to reducing greenhouse gases. So think about that.
Okay.
I don't know the answer, but I'm just throw out the challenge and maybe we can all come up with something good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you also make a great point on making sure that we're being accountable and making sure that we are coming back to bodies such as yourselves collectively and explaining how we're doing.
Yeah.
So we talk about that in the action plan as well. We're proposing that we put out an update in 2018, but in the meantime, come back to CFAC and other bodies such as yourself to kind of provide updates as we're going along.
Metrics are critically important, and I think even the legislators looking at those more and more. Who cares if you've got all these incentives and it doesn't reduce one
if we
molecule.
Can't show how it does it.
And because all you're doing is annoying people.
Right.
And so,
Understand.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather.
Frank Ramirez, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. quickly to your point, when we got into this project, it was very clear. Well, by the way, Michael Rossi took a hands-on approach to this, and he was very active in meeting with industry leaders throughout the various months that we've been involved. But we decided that there was no metric that we can come up with that identifies the competitiveness of how we increase the competitiveness of the freight industry. So what we're doing, as you know, this is a living document. Once it's approved by the governor, it's going to continue moving forward in other iterations. And what we're going to be doing as GoBiz, we're going to be convening a group of stakeholders to deal with identifying a metric on how we measure the competitiveness, not just overall of the industry, but the different segments of the industry. As you know, there's rail, there's trucking, there's air, and so imports, and so we're going to be working on that metric. This plan does not have a target for competitiveness because we didn't have the sufficient time and the expertise to develop one and feel confident that it was a good metric. So we're going to continue the work on that. In conjunction with that, Michael Rossi is going to be working with the Drucker School of Business out of Claremont University to help us with this effort. They're going to be assisting us in trying to come up with a metric and analyzing some of the impacts, some of the actions that are being proposed by this plan. So it's going to be an effort moving forward. We haven't done it yet, and that's very clear, but we intend to do it.
It's unbelievably complex. I mean, good luck with it. But I love that we can put our heads together and try to come up with something. It's daunting what you've got your arms around. So thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I just want to reinforce the importance of the line item where the governor asked us to increase our competitiveness. Do no harm, or do as little harm as possible, is very different than increasing your competitiveness. And I can tell you on the goods movement sector, everybody wants to eat our lunch. Market share is something that most of us all watch for whatever business we happen to be in. So I do think we can come to some metrics of how we're going to measure success. The governor's executive order tells us that a third of our jobs relate directly or indirectly to this sector. We also know that, Comey, in your summary, so you've picked the numbers up and looked at them too. So we could say, you know, maybe we want to increase those number of jobs by X, whatever. But this is very, very complicated. I know you all have been in it enough to learn that. I think having realistic resources to do that, and when we look at our staffing challenges, I think having the right expertise, getting the right people on the team is going to be very, very important. And we also have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that there are huge private sector investments that are part of this system of systems that we call goods movement and the supply chain. So if you look at the discussions we're having compared to the investments of our 2 Class 1s or our ocean carriers or our ports or our transload centers, they're mega dollars there, and we're only going to win when we can get alignment and get everybody moving in the same direction, because if we get ourselves into a stiff situation like we're in today where everybody's hunkering down and there's nothing new coming on, there's not going to be any room for any innovation or anything, and our goal of increasing our competitiveness and actually we're going to harm the economy even more by increased gridlock. So I think we've only just begun, so I want to commend you for working hard all year. I think everybody on that team would agree that we could keep the full court press on for 2 or 3 more years and still just be on the freshman level of understanding what we can do. But we've got to keep going. We've got to keep the pressure on to the Energy Commission. I hope you're going to lean in and replicate your efforts at the ports where you've got the working partners coming together with your researchers, with real live people on the ground saying, yes, let's focus on the R&D here. We're going to need a tremendous amount of R&D. But we've got to get this right, guys and girls. And so I want to ask everybody, and I know we have a few of our freight partners here still with us, but this is so very, very important. I'm hoping that we'll continue to up our game, and I am very proud to have won the Drucker Award for Excellence in Logistics. So if everybody wanted to come with me and learn on this journey, it's absolutely fascinating, and we have to work hard.
And Mr. Fraser is going to speak, but before he does, we have 4 speakers on this issue, vote, and then today, before we leave, we're going to get through the information in the consent calendar. So if you got something to say it. If you don't.
Actually, this is a question to Comey. And with the proposal to change the TCIF, how will that affect how we do infrastructure?
It shouldn't. I think the proposal is really intended to follow the model of the TCIF. There will be some adjustments to it. If you remember, the original TCIF was set up for bond funding, so we need to adjust that. But we're also looking to have a situation where we have some opportunity for statewide significant projects to also be looked at the state level. And so that would be the tweak that I would see in the process.
What I would hope that we're looking at when we talk about our economy and freight, we can have a wonderful goal of electrifying or zero-emission vehicles, but if they're still sitting on the 710, not moving, we've accomplished nothing as far as the economy.
And I would agree.
So I think that we have to look at capacity in parallel and take the low-hanging fruit where we can actually get the GHG goals accomplished by getting things moving now, and then look at the advanced technology gains that we can make going in the future. But let's get the economy moving now and look at the goals progressing. And I don't know if you've talked to industry, but are they able to achieve these 100,000 vehicles by 2030? Are they willing partners? Are they participants? Have they committed to this? And those are questions that I think are very viable.
Yeah, I will take that. Thank you for the question. So we have been having conversations about the 100,000 vehicles. I think you're very aware and familiar with our tech assessments and those kind of conversations. And we understand the challenges and the needs for the funding. We were very fortunate to be able to get some of the cap and trade funds to be able to do the LCT projects and be able to do the demonstration projects like the one that was announced last week, which is great partnership with the air districts and the manufacturers to try and do things like the zero-emission drayage trucks. So completely understand that there is some demonstration, as Fran mentioned, that we need to move on. We need to understand, looking at the incentive programs that we have now and looking at some of the technology that's available now, understanding the work that we need to do with our partners moving forward. We understand that the 100,000 is an ambitious goal, but we're hoping to be able to achieve that and maybe even do more. And we are also hoping to have some funding to be able to help support that, because we understand that that investment is needed, and that financial support is also needed.
Well, I think that, during our hearing that we had on the transportation programs through my transportation committee with CARB, we did ask for performance metrics to be supplied to us, and wasn't shared candidly what was accomplished. So I think when it's been asked by Commissioner Dunn that moving forward that we look at and make sure that when you put a goal in place and that there's an ongoing accountability that this legislature is going to want to understand and be able to be a participant in your success, and also a willingness to fund on these programs. I think that's a very, very, very big component that needs to be addressed, that metrics that the legislature can understand, and that also that the industry has a willingness to participate in. And so I look forward to that dialogue.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, and we really appreciate your support and your staff's participation and feedback and their comments as well on all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just
We're going to
address
go to the speakers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're talking too much here. Hey, Mike Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Mike Jacob with Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. We represent ocean carriers and terminal operators. And
at risk of doing more speaking, we'd like to thank the staff that we've been working with over the past year. We're a member of the Efficiency Work Group, the Freight Action Committee, Freight Advisory Committee. Basically, every time we've been able to engage in the executive order process we have, because we believe that the goals are what we need to be focusing on as an industry, but also as policymakers in the state. How do you facilitate investment in the environment and in the economy at the same time? These things are not mutually exclusive if you do them the right way. If you do them the right way, what you're fostering is investment. So we'll know if it's economically viable because people are investing in it. And the hallmark of the freight industry is the infrastructure is driven by private investment. So we need public infrastructure investment to facilitate that. We need to go beyond what we have now. What you have right now in terms of total industry investment is what you're going to get based on market principles. It just is what it is. If you want us to facilitate greater and higher levels of investment, which is what the Sustainable Freight Action Plan is looking for, we need help from the state to help us jumpstart that and change the dynamics so we have the mutuality of investment that Mr. Fraser was talking about. And so we're supporting his bill 1591 and his bill 2170, but the context is going further than that in this commission. We'd be pleased to have your support for other bills, including zero emissions bills for inclusion in the next round of California Competes tax credit. That bill is out there. Zero emissions investment bills with sales tax exemptions like exist for manufacturing equipment. Those bills are in front of the legislature right now. They're compatible with this plan, but unless we actually have action from the state that helps to jumpstart the mutuality of investment in the new round of infrastructure and environmental improvements, it's not going to happen. So this plan's been out for a week and a half. We will be submitting formal comments by the deadline in July. But again, we want to thank all the folks from agencies standing and sitting behind me for working with us on doing this. The goals are laudable, and they're things that we applaud. But they're not viable unless we actually put some oomph and money behind it, and that's what we need to be doing next. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to butcher this, but Shreyas, is that how you say it?
Hi, good evening. Shreyas Jethker with Coalition for Cleaner. That was very close. Thank you. This is my first CTC meeting. Very exciting. I hope to come back and bring some friends with me. And I'd also just like to also say I'm a member of the California Cleaner Freight Coalition, so I offer these comments on behalf of our coalition today. And appreciative of the draft plan and many elements in it, and I'd like to just offer a few comments on some improvements we hope to see that we'll be sharing with all the agencies. The first piece that I think really relates to the Transportation Commission is making sure that when we prioritize projects and funding for projects when there is funding available, that we do that with this Freight Action Plan and sustainability emission reductions in mind. And unfortunately, we didn't hear that necessarily with the Fast Lane and Tiger grants that have just been discussed earlier today. But again, we do need to make sure that all freight infrastructure planning is really, and funding is really tied to this Freight Action Plan. I also want to call out public participation in freight project development, that we want to make sure that there are guarantees of public participation in all phases of freight project development. A couple other points. One is about funding sources being identified. I think it would be great to see something similar to what was in Prop 1B, where for every $2 of money spent on infrastructure investment, there was $1 for zero-emission vehicle technology. So we hope to see something like that carried over as we move forward with the Freight Action Plan and freight infrastructure improvement. Just I want to speak to a couple comments that were made about metrics and getting metrics. I applaud that and would like to see more of that data as well. I just want to say that data and quantitative data doesn't tell us a full story. So just to be open to qualitative data as well. For instance, really developing the technology to get zero-emission vehicles, especially in the heaviest duty trucks, is really an important benefit. And so, please also consider those kinds of qualitative benefits from the Freight Action Plan as really just as important as, sort of quantitative targets and metrics that we need to be looking at as well. And one last piece is about labor. I hadn't really heard labor mentioned here today. I've heard a lot of talk about business and certainly understand the importance of supporting business and competitiveness. One addition that we see in the draft plan is including the California Workforce Development Board, who came up with some great ideas such as community workforce agreements, project labor agreements, and freight infrastructure planning and port operations. So we support those and want to make sure that as we grow the economy in the freight sector, that labor and workers are benefiting too.
Thank you. Tim Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Tim Schott on behalf of the California Association of Port Authorities, which is comprised of the 11 publicly owned ports here in California. We would first also like to thank the state agencies and their very capable staff that we've been working with for about a year now. And they've been very inclusive, and we appreciate that. We're still reviewing the draft, but we expect to have more detailed comments in writing in the coming weeks. We appreciate the fact that the plan recognizes the importance of balancing the goals of increasing our efficiency in the goods movement sector, increasing competitiveness, and transitioning to a low-carbon future. And our members are committed to those goals. Our members, our ports, have been leading the nation and in fact the world in developing environmentally friendly port operations, and we're very proud of the achievements that the freight sector has made over the last decade. Our large ports report emissions reductions on the order of 80% in particulate matter, 90% in SOx, and more than 50% in NOx in the last decade. And those are tremendous achievements that have come at great price. We have had to spend a lot of money to make that happen. I think the estimate from ARB is about $5 billion in what are California-only costs. As we compete, we're faced with significant California-only costs in some of the most intense competition we've seen in any memory, frankly. But we believe the state should continue its leadership role in air quality improvements, and our members are committed to doing that. In fact, we frankly believe that continued progress on emissions reductions is not only an environmental, but a competitive imperative. What we need is state support in helping to develop and implement the technologies that will take us to the next level. And we need help with maintaining and improving operational efficiencies, and finally with infrastructure improvements, which of course is where we expect the majority of your focus to be. And we would suggest that the TCIF is an appropriate program, an appropriate vehicle for state investment in freight infrastructure, and we'd encourage you to look to that as a methodology. We would also suggest, make sure I don't forget here, that of course the TCIF has been demonstrated to leverage significant federal, state, local, private dollars. We think it's another good place to go. Keep leveraging dollars. And finally, we'd suggest that prioritizing projects that provide access to our ports is an important element of that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeannie?
Thanks, Commissioner. Since I'm last, I'll try to be really quick. Jeannie Wardweller with the California Bicycle Coalition again. Thank you all for bearing with us through all of this. I want to support all of the comments that Shreyas from the Coalition for Cleaner Freight made. And I also just want to expound on a couple of things. I think in terms of, who we want to make sure is represented and the stakeholders that are part of this conversation, let's be mindful of the communities that are adjacent to our freight corridors and our ports and the impacts on those communities, and ensure that the public participation process is involving those communities. That many of them are low income, many of them are communities of color, that these air quality impacts, safety impacts are really most harming them. So I think they need to be primary beneficiaries of this freight plan and the investments that come out of them. So I think that the clean vehicle investments are certainly important, but other types of mitigation that really really target benefits to those communities are critical. And in addition, I think when we're talking about the relieving congestion along our freight corridors, we also need to be mindful of the single occupancy vehicles that travel on those same corridors and mitigating the potential increase in vehicle travel from those vehicles, and how reducing single occupancy vehicles in those corridors could be another way to relieve congestion and expedite freight movement in these corridors. So any types of mitigation that can reduce VMT can be a benefit to our freight plan. And overall, we're really supportive of the direction of the Sustainable Freight Plan and the governor, and reducing GHGs while continuing to improve the California economy. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Garth, you want to wrap this up?
Commissioners, we were just looking for, authority to move ahead and prepare comments that you'll be looking at in the end of June 29th or 30th. Commission.
Mr. Chair, could I just add one more comment, please? And I think this is addressed to the Governor's Office of Business. If you would also track any of the shippers or logistics people that decline to go along with this and opt out and want to go to another state because of this, would be very helpful. Because we can create 25% in efficiencies if they decide to go somewhere else.
Grant?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Edmonds, second by Commissioner Arp. Any further questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Stephen, information calendar?
Yes, Commissioners. So we're skipping number 26. Information calendar is the next 7 agenda items, number 27 through 33. These are information items deemed by staff not to raise any concerns, and individual items will not be presented unless a commissioner requests. Consent calendar is the next 13 items, 34 through 46. And the following changes need to be noted under item number 43, resolutions of necessity, resolution C-21-453, C-21-457, C-21-463, C-21-464, and C-21-468 are withdrawn. And under agenda item 44, Director's Deed DD-05639-359-1 is also withdrawn. With those changes, staff recommends that you approve the resolutions of the consent calendar.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, second by Commissioner Dunn. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we're going to take item, I'm not going to. Rand's going to take item 26, starting with item 26 in the morning. So with that, we are